James Bolger was born on March the 16th, 1990, in Kirkby, England. His parents Denise and Ralph had previously lost a daughter who was stillborn, but James was their bundle of joy and described as a happy-go-lucky child, always smiling and making his parents laugh. Denise was naturally overprotective of her baby boy, but tragically, James's precious life would be taken far too soon.
Tell us something first about James. What kind of little boy was he?
Very pleasant, loves entertaining people. He never walked anywhere, always bounced everywhere. He had kind of long blonde hair that moved every time he bounced. His personality was just great to be around, and when you were in his company, he just made you laugh.
He was lovely, he was always playing. He was just into everything. And like, he didn't call me Dad, he called me Ralph, you know what I mean? Because everybody else called me Ralph. He
was just so breathtaking. He had lovely soft hair. You know, I can still see the smile on his face with the bouncing hair, because that's all he ever did, was smile. Absolutely amazing little boy.
James was a cute little kid. He loved everything, you know what I mean? A bit like mischievous, in his little ways at the time. Just like a normal kid, getting a taste of life.
I used to read a book to him, make sure he'd read it back, so he was learning from an early age. He knew his ABCs, he could count. He was just an amazing little boy, and I spent a lot of time teaching him stuff.
Well, his bubbly life, get on with anyone, sort of thing.
And he was keen on the Turtles and Michael Jackson, I think.
Oh, he absolutely loved Michael Jackson. Now, I wouldn't have to put Michael Jackson's video on. James would do that for me, and every time he put the video on, he'd dance to him. He tried to move like Michael, and it was just so funny.
He loved Michael Jackson, didn't he? That's the song that you had played at the funeral. And didn't Michael Jackson send you a message as well?
Yeah, the early days,
Yeah.
What kind of boy do you think he would have grown into?
I think it would have been brilliant. I'd have liked to have took him fishing,
On February the 12th, 1993, just a month before James was due to turn 3 years old, his mother Denise took him out to the New Strand shopping centre in Liverpool. My wife had asked me to take James with me to a friend's house to do some DIY on that fateful morning, as she was going to visit her mother. I was normally happy to have James with me, but on this occasion, with all the tools, I was concerned that he might get hurt. Not taking James with me that morning is the biggest single regret of my life.
Did you feel guilt that you hadn't taken him with you that day?
Things would have been different, wouldn't they?
You blamed yourself for quite a long time, because on the day that James was taken, Denise had asked you to take him with you to work, but because you were doing something quite dangerous, you didn't take him.
It's just a hard one, isn't it? It's, if it had been with me still, would he have been here?
Yeah.
So
you can never blame yourself for that. I know.
Can you forgive yourself?
There, 10-year-olds Robert Thompson and John Venables were caught on CCTV watching other children, selecting a potential target. The two boys were playing truant at school, something they did a lot that seemingly went unnoticed and unsanctioned.
So do you blame the truancy service and the school for not having spotted the behaviour that they were displaying?
Well, I think that, the way it works today, all parents get a phone call if the child or kids aren't in school. And I'm just wondering why, they let it slip that them two were missing on the same day. Whether they entered school in the beginning at 9 o'clock and then left the school early, I don't know. Or whether they just never went to school at all that day. I just really don't know. They should have been in the school, so the teachers then should have known, where are they, and they should have informed the parents, why aren't your kids at school? But the parents should have they should have known if they were bunking off, because I know my kids, if they don't attend school, I know.
What's your hobby then?
Skipping school.
Skipping school, is that right?
That's not a hobby, that's a profession, Bobby, when you do it as well as you.
Robert Thompson was the 5th of 7 children, but 5 years earlier his father completely abandoned the family. This led to his mother Anne falling into a deep depression and heavy drinking, as well as several overdose suicide attempts. By the time of this tragic event, all of Thompson's older brothers had already been taken into care, one of which had done so by their own request. Similarly, John Venable's parents were also separated, but unlike Thompson, John had a history of violence at school, having previously attempted to throttle another child. 6 years earlier, when John was only 5 years old, the police were called as his mother had left him and his 7- and 3-year-old siblings alone for 3 hours. His mother Susan was struggling with depression and also suffered suicidal tendencies.
Who do you blame for what happened? Obviously them, but what about their parents?
Well, definitely blame them too. But, you know, the parents should have been monitoring them anyway. I know where my kids are all the time. Them two should have been at school. The only two to blame with them too. They had no right to take them from me in the first place.
Throughout that day, the boys had shoplifted some sweets, batteries, a troll doll, and a can of blue paint, tossing them down escalators for fun. We would later discover that they had planned to abduct a child and push them into oncoming traffic. Just a few weeks earlier, they had allegedly attempted to abduct a little girl from a school, but failed, and no further action was done.
They knew what they were going to do that day. They pre-planned it, and they planned it weeks before. They tried to abduct a little girl before they actually got James, so they were totally different anyway. So, you know, it was in them to go and do something like that, but I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes to the way we look at kids now.
At one point, on this February day in 1993, they actually did grab a child to try to take them away from their mother. The mum noticed the 2 boys attempting to get her kids' attention, and after a few moments, her 3-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son were both missing. She soon managed to find the former, but the latter was nowhere to be seen. His sister claimed,
"He's gone outside with the boy."
Thankfully, she rushed outside to find her son being encouraged to follow the 2 boys. Once they saw his mother, Venables told the child to return to her, and they soon disappeared. She had managed to save her son, but nothing more was done at the time. If it had been, a horrific tragedy may have been prevented.
Do you think that anything would have stopped them doing what they were going to do on that day, or as you say, they'd set out to do that?
I think they set out to do that. As I say, they should have been in school, but obviously they were playing truant, and they probably were bunking off school a few weeks before that. When they tried to abduct a little girl, they tried to entice her out of a school. So, you know, they definitely were out to take a child. If it hadn't been James, it would have been someone else's child. They would have definitely done it anyway.
At 3:40 p.m, Denise Bolger took her 2-year-old son James into the A.R. Tim's butcher shop on the lower floor of the shopping centre. When at the checkout, she let go of James's hand momentarily to go through her purse for change to pay for her shopping. But in those few, vital seconds, James disappeared.
It was just that split seconds where I went to pay for something, look back down, he'd gone. It was just a split seconds. And I think that's going to live with me for the rest of my life.
Did you ever see him in the Strand? You shook your head again?
Yeah.
Bobby, was that on the day that we're talking about? Was that on
Friday.
this Friday? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were going up the escalators. They were coming through the doors that there's loads of.
Who was he with?
No,
Little James.
his mum.
With his mum? He was just running around, was he, James?
Yeah.
Will you tell me exactly what? Slowly, right?
He was just like coming here. And then he grabbed his hands and walked up the Strand.
How did he come up to John?
How did he come up to John?
James?
No, he was walking around the Strand.
Who was? James?
The baby.
Was he?
I told him to take him back.
You did what?
Told him to take him back.
You told him to take it back?
No,
All right,
blame.
Bobby. No, you're not getting all the blame. I'm just asking your son. I'm trying to find out the truth.
We'll make the blame.
Wait a minute, Bobby. Listen.
Just a generation earlier, mothers had left their children outside shops unattended in their prams. But after James Bulger was snatched in just a matter of seconds in a pre-planned kidnap, parents were reminded just how unexpected and horrendous things can happen, even in a busy shopping precinct. There's no doubt in my mind that it changed the way people were with their own children. For some time afterwards, parents were particularly protective of their kids whenever they went out as a family. My own daughter Lauren was the same age as James at the time, and like parents across the country, I didn't let her out of my sight. The case had an extra level of horror.
For goodness sake, keep tight hold of your children. Poor James only went missing from his mother for a matter of seconds, and he'd gone and disappeared.
Getting my purse out to buy 2 pork chops for tea was the last thing I did before my world imploded further. I went into the butcher's holding my little boy's hand, and left without James's hand in mine.
CCTV caught Robert and John approaching the toddler and leading him out of the shopping centre. It only took 91 seconds for the duo to grab the child from his mother and escape the building. There were times when James actually ran ahead of them, but they managed to get him to come back, saying calmly, "Come on, baby." They left the building at 3:42 p.m. Just 2 minutes after Denise took her son into the butcher shop, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. She quickly realised that her son was missing and rushed for help, calling for security staff. Sadly, by 4:15 p.m, over half an hour since he was last seen, there was still no sign, and the police were called. They searched the entire shopping centre and found nothing, and by 5:30, the building sadly had to be closed down for the day. This led to the entire city being searched for James Bulger.
If you've got me, baby, just bring them back.
I've never been through anything like this before, so we're obviously at all about it, especially the wife.
After leaving the shopping centre, the two boys walked him a quarter of a mile away to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, where they dropped him on his head and joked about pushing him into the water. Instead, they decided to walk the child 2.5 miles across Liverpool, a walk that took them 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete. At around 4:15 p.m, Gillian Burke claimed,
"I saw a toddler being chased up a hill by 2 older boys. I was driven home by my husband when we came to a stop at a giveaway sign. I noticed a boy in a black jacket sitting on a wall. Behind him, a little boy was running up the hill. A boy in a mustard jacket was chasing him."
She would later recognise the boys when she saw them on television. Irene Hitman claimed to have confronted the boys and demanded they take the child home, but they refused, and Malcolm Walton also claimed to have spotted them and noticed that James had lumps on his head, but nothing more was done. Both witnesses have blamed themselves for not intervening.
In the afternoon that day, I was taking my dog for a walk around the reservoir close to my home in Breezehill, Merseyside. At about 4:40 p.m, I heard crying and looked over the edge of the reservoir to a lower level. I saw 2 boys pulling a baby up some steps. When they were about 3 feet away, I noticed the look on the young child's face. The baby was frightened. There was a lump on his forehead and a terrible lump on the top of his head. I asked them what was the matter. They said he had fallen down the steps. They told me they were going home, to which I replied, "Hurry up home and let his mum see his head." I thought there were 3 little brothers.
Though Irene's statement would be called into question, as she later claimed,
"I asked the 2 boys if they knew the toddler, and they both said no, they didn't. I told them that they should get some attention for his injuries. They both said they would take him to the police station."
However, despite signing a cross-examination confirming these words, she later claimed that she never made this second statement to the police. Other witnesses claimed that they saw James laughing, which is why they didn't step in, while others admitted they saw him resisting and even calling for his mother, before Robert Thompson supposedly kicked him in the ribs. One woman witnessed from her home Thompson punch James and shake him, but instead of coming out to help, she simply closed her curtains and continued her day. Another witness claimed to have seen a young child who he would later recognise as James running in the direction of a busy road, while Kenneth Smith stated, "The child was crying quite severely. I could see the tears. I saw him run into a coned area by the road. Then one of the 2 older boys who was with him put his arms around him, picked him up and put him back on the pavement as though to protect him from traffic." Because of this, Kenneth believed that they were innocent children doing their best to protect James, and pursued it no further. Approximately 38 people witnessed the two 10-year-old boys walking a crying toddler across town, and only 3 decided to approach them. Other than the aforementioned Irene, an old lady noticed the injuries and saw James crying, so she confronted them, but was told by Venables that they found James at the bottom of the hill. She simply asked them to take him to the local police station, and they agreed to do so. As they walked away, the old lady had a funny feeling and called after them, but they ignored her and continued walking. However, a nearby woman reassured her that everything was fine, as she had heard James laughing not too long ago. They both decided to let it go. Not long after, another woman tried to intervene and offered to take James to the police station herself. However, she had her young daughter with her, and she needed someone to look after her while she took care of James, asking a nearby woman, who refused to do so as her dog didn't like children. So sadly, James was allowed to be taken away by John and Robert once again. Most believe that they were all brothers, or that nobody that young could possibly cause any real danger. Many witnesses admitted they saw James crying and even witnessed the boys hitting him. At one point, they pulled his hood over his head to try to cover his injuries. At one point, they took him inside a pet shop, but they were promptly kicked out. The shopkeepers admitted that they were suspicious, but decided to pursue no further action. At one point, the trio came across some older boys that John and Robert knew, who asked who James was. John claimed that he was Thompson's little brother and that they were taking him home, and this would be the final possible opportunity for someone to rescue James Bulger.
I went there. I should have been there.
Sometimes it's easier to blame ourselves than to actually stop and say, I couldn't have done anything, I wasn't there.
They eventually reached Walton, which had a police station just across the road, leading to them instead heading up a steep bank to a railway line close to Walton Park Cemetery. Allegedly, they did reconsider their actions at one point and turned away, but it didn't last long. At some time between 5:45 and 6:30 PM, Robert Thompson and John Venables threw paint into James' eyes, kicked him, stomped on him, and threw bricks and stones at the child. They also placed batteries inside his mouth. There were some reports that they also put the batteries inside James's anus, but these weren't found during the autopsy, so it remains unconfirmed. The boys dropped a 10-kilogram railway fish plate on James, causing 10 skull fractures in total. Overall, he suffered 42 injuries, but they were so severe it was impossible to determine which one had actually killed him. Robert and John decided to lay his body down on the railway tracks, weighing him down so that the train would make it all look like a horrific accident. James Bulger's body was then completely severed in half, but his remains wouldn't be found for 2 days. For 48 hours, Denise and James's father Ralph had no idea where their son was, and they could only wait.
Ralph and myself went upstairs and chatted how the police were doing their best to be in touch with them and to keep them aware of what was happening. But just the pain of it all, the not knowing, and the guilt feeling of a parent.
We do in situations like this often give a lot more sympathy to the mother because it's that maternal thing, and dads sort of get kind of forgotten a little bit, but your grief is just as great.
So you just have to deal with it the best way you can, really.
The police spent hours searching through the CCTV at the shopping centre until the 2 boys were finally spotted leading James away from his mother. Denise was seen leaving the same butcher's shop quite literally seconds after her son. One boy was incorrectly identified as one of the suspects and actually had to leave the city due to threats, believing that he was responsible for the abduction. All schools were checked for missing students that day, and some parents even blamed their own children for the abduction. In fact, when the CCTV was discovered, Ralph and Denise were actually relieved, convinced that since James left with 2 other children, he would be completely safe.
I thought they're only kids, you know what I mean? It's only kids, that's got him. He thought it was I'll be alright. That was what I really thought, I'll be alright. Kids are not gonna do nothing soon, you know what I mean?
You wouldn't think that a 10-year-old could harm a fly, never mind another child. But these two were different. They were different 10-year-olds to normal 10-year-olds.
Streets, canals and the woods were all being searched before a young boy arrived at the police station to report that a dead body was found on the railway tracks.
And as you come out walking, you could just see it there as you looked on the floor, just right there, by the little path.
Because I said, it's a baby. Because no clicked on because that baby went missing. And then we all ran towards the bridge, got down and went to Walton Lane.
What did you do once you'd found it? Who did you tell?
The police.
Police searching for the Merseyside toddler James Bulger say a body's been found on a railway embankment close to where he went missing. There's been no formal identification, but the police have confirmed that the body is that of a small boy. The 2-year-old disappeared after becoming separated from his mother at a shopping centre on Friday.
Police are visiting hundreds of houses on Merseyside tonight, looking for any clue into the killing of 2-year-old James Bulger.
Police on Merseyside say that 2-year-old James Bulger, who disappeared from a shopping precinct at the weekend, was horribly murdered and then dumped on a railway line. They say that someone must know the identity of the 2 boys who took James from the precinct.
How do you tell your wife the way your son died? So many feelings, so many emotions there. Your head's bubbling all the time. And the worst thing, I just thought how can I tell her? How can I tell her the way James was murdered? What's the best way of putting it? There's no best way of putting it.
I was punching the wall, screaming before I collapsed and wailed like a baby. We were both crying together, trapped in a world of pain that no one else could ever understand. Denise was inconsolable. To hear your wife crying in such a way is unbearable. It was like listening to a wounded animal.
The worst part for them was that they weren't allowed to see James. They didn't know when they would be allowed to see him. They didn't know when his body would be released to them. And so there was that waiting.
I just want to think about James the last day I've seen it, you know what I mean? But I can't think of that. What sticks in my head now is what I've been told, what's happened to him. I think to myself, he must have been kind for me. He must have wanted me. He must have wanted me to be there to help him, to save him. And I ain't there. Just say the lady for him, mutilate him. Couldn't have an open coffin, you know what I mean? Because the fucking bastard's going.
It was quickly determined that he died before being hit. James's shoes, socks, trousers and underpants had all been removed, suggesting he was also sexually assaulted. His foreskin had also been forcibly pulled back. Pretty soon, a witness who spotted the boys on the day identified John Venables as one of the suspects, and they were both taken in for questioning. When the police arrived at their homes, they were actually surprised to see how old they really were. Discovering the gruesome remains and seeing the CCTV images, they assumed that the killers were teenagers, and were mortified to find out that they were only 10.
Bobby, I came round to your house this morning, didn't I?
Yeah.
What did I say to you?
No listening.
Correct. What for?
James.
James, what about James?
That you said on suspicion of murdering him.
Well, very well remembered.
They weren't even convinced that they had the right boys, refusing to believe that they could possibly be capable of such crimes. Initially, Thompson asked the police if James had been taken to hospital to make him alive again, while John told investigators, "What about his mum? Will you tell her I'm sorry?" They were both found to have had blood on their shoes, which matched James Bulger's, and some bruises on his corpse matched indents on their shoes as well. At first, they both refused to provide any details when interviewed by police and a child psychiatrist. John denied even being at the shopping centre that day, but Robert soon confessed, though his story didn't match up with John's.
John saying to us that he wasn't down at the Strand.
But we were.
I know you were at the Strand, but why should he lie to us by saying that he wasn't in the Strand? He's scared of saying that he was down in the Strand because something happened, didn't it?
Not the baby got took.
Yeah.
Not by me.
He said that the two of you were in the Strand and that you saw the little boy.
We never. I never got the boy. I never killed him.
And he said that you took him by the hand and led him out of the Strand shops.
We never. He's a liar.
Calm down, my gosh.
Alright, come on, look.
That's the God's honest truth.
God's honest truth, I'm telling you that we never. He was too scared. He was probably too scared.
It wasn't until John was alone with his mother where she told him that they would still love him even if he was guilty, which is when he finally confessed to the murder, not realising that the police were listening in, leading to him later making an open confession.
You had a conversation with your mum and you then requested that myself come into the room. Is that right? Yeah. So the boy holding James's hand is you.
Yeah.
And the boy ahead of you in the dark jacket and trousers, Robert Thompson. And what was it you told us?
James.
Right. Now, I know that took a lot of doing.
I can't tell you anything else.
Right.
That's the way it's been.
Not all of their interviews are available to the public, but investigators noted that Robert Thompson changed his story 5 times. However, they also confessed that John actually asked them if you can remove fingerprints from your skin, which led them to believe that they were both fully aware of what they had done. It was also later discovered that one of the killers actually did leave flowers at James's memorial before they were arrested. It was believed that John Venables was clearly afraid of his own mother. She was described as being the harsher out of his 2 parents, and investigators did admit that she often interfered with the questioning.
We never robbed any kids.
So you were in Bootle New Strand?
Was you in Bootle Strand?
We never got a kid, Mum. We never got a kid.
Mrs. Venables, would you... I must ask you not to get angry with it.
However, at one point, John was questioned again and asked about the damage done to James's genitals, which is when Venables viciously attacked his own father. On February the 20th, 1993, just 8 days after the attack, Robert Thompson and John Venables were charged with murder. The trial didn't begin until November the 1st, but they were actually given an adult trial, which caused controversy, as some claimed this was unfair due to their ages, and they shouldn't have been held legally responsible for their actions, though others argued that they were clearly mature enough to understand what they were doing was wrong and calculated, considering they scouted out their victim and planned to use a train to avoid blame. It was on par with the horror of the Moors murders in the 1960s, because for 2 weeks, the whole country was consumed by the disappearance and then murder of a toddler. It was an appalling event in the pantheon of horrific murders. I think because of the image of James being led to his death, which terrified everyone, and the young age of the killers. Sitting in court, Thompson in particular came across as pure evil. Those 2 boys skipped school and set off to kill that day. They had pre-planned their crime and knew exactly what they were going to do.
I remember seeing them for the first time, like, be honest with you, all I could feel was like hate, you know what I mean? Feel like pure hate, like you've never felt before, like, in your life, you know what I mean?
Child psychiatrist Eileen Vizard was convinced they were fully aware of what they were doing, though she did admit that Thompson suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorder after the event. Neither boy was allowed to speak in court, and instead 20 hours of the interviews were played. It was believed that Thompson took the lead role of the abduction, while Venables had the idea of using the train as a diversion, though John did admit that James took a liking to him and even held his hand during the long walk through the city. During the interviews, Robert Thompson was described by some as one of the most frightening children they had ever seen. Some reports claimed he remained remorseless throughout, while Venables had several hysterical outbursts. But others dispute this and believe that John's outbursts were caused by his temper and inability to maintain control. It's impossible to know for sure who was truly the instigator of the attack.
So we walked up to him and we were walking around with him and I took his hand.
Well, whose idea was it to walk towards him?
Mine.
Was it?
Then it was Robert's idea to kill him.
I know the truth. I believe I know the truth.
I was there.
That's right.
You waved.
Correct, but I know that a lot of things that have gone on.
Yeah, well, do you know it was me that killed him? It wasn't. I never even killed him. And we went outside to the canal.
What for?
Don't know, we said let's throw him in the water. He was persuading him, he said kneel down and let's look at the water and all that, but he wouldn't. Because when we wouldn't get him down, Robert kicked him up and threw him on the floor and that's where he got his bump on his head. I'm going to end up getting overblamed because I've got blood on me.
We're asking you, son, and we want you to tell us the truth, that's all. Not give the blame to you or anything else. But it's only the truth that we're
Yeah, but Johnny threw a brick in his face.
Why were you taking him to Watton Village?
Don't know, we didn't know what to do.
You walk along where?
To the train track.
You said he got hit with a brick first, did he? Then, what did he do?
Another brick.
He threw another brick.
He took him in the rail shop and started throwing bricks at him. And then...
Who did?
Robbie.
Why did he throw bricks at him?
No.
He hit him where exactly?
In the face.
In the face?
I think he hit him in the eyes.
And he hit him in the eyes? Right.
Now, was James making any noises then?
He was knocked out.
He was knocked out. Was he moving at all?
I didn't throw any bricks because Robert said pick a brick up and throw it and just threw it on the floor.
Was he able to talk?
Yeah.
James?
Yeah.
What did he say to you?
Want me now.
Was he bleeding?
Oh,
Where was he bleeding from?
Face.
2055.
Will I be able to go home tonight?
We don't know yet, we don't know yet. And I want you to tell
I
me.
don't need to answer any more questions, do I?
Come on now, Bobby.
Yeah, well, I want to kill him and I've got a baby of my own.
I'm trying
If I wanted to kill a baby, I'd kill my own, wouldn't I?
What was Robert saying while he was doing all this?
He was saying stay down, you stupid dick and all that.
Why did he want him to stay down?
Don't know. Wanted him dead, probably.
Where did the stones in the bar hit him?
In the head.
And you said the bar knocked him out?
Yeah. Onto the railway track.
And what happened then?
No, he was just lying there. Just finished now because I can't speak anymore.
In Venables' case, in the interview, he was quite emotional. He was subject to breaking down. His activities in the interview room were quite bizarre, in so much he'd get up, he'd walk round, and he'd throw himself at one of the detectives for comfort and support. In Thompson's case, he was completely different. He was streetwise well above the age of 10.
Some investigators described Robert Thompson as being incredibly clever, and they could tell that he was maliciously trying to con them. He was very street smart and very clever. The 10-year-old was trying very hard to con me. I don't know how he was doing at school, but he was switched on and he was trying to con me, trying very hard. He would cry whenever there would be an awkward situation so he could avoid questioning. As far as I'm concerned that day, I stared evil in the face. I think Thompson was in charge, but they both attacked James. They were a match made in hell, a freak of nature. They went out that day to kill. I truly believe that. And if they hadn't been caught, I fear they would have struck again. Pure evil. I will never change my mind about that. During the court proceedings, 300 people gathered outside, and a riot nearly broke out in protest for justice for James, leading to the court case completely relocating. It was a theory for a while that they were inspired by the horror movie Child's Play 3. The movie depicts the killer doll being splashed with blue paint during a paintball game, and it turns out that John's father actually did rent the movie just a few months prior to the murder, but it's unclear if the boys had seen it or not. We went through something like 200 titles rented by the Venables family. There were some you or I wouldn't want to see, but nothing, no scene or plot or dialogue where you could put your finger on the freeze button and say, that influenced a boy to go out and commit murder. Allegedly, after court, John Venables would remove his clothes, claiming, I can smell James, like a baby smell.
Seems a bit sad to think yourself you could hate 2 kids. That much. I want them to get life, whether they were kids or not. To be honest with you, I had to sit there, day by day, while the 2 little bastards were laughing about fucking killing my son, about fucking mutilating him. You know what I mean? I had to sit there while they're sitting there sniggering. You know what I mean?
On November the 24th, 1993, the boys were both now 11 years old and found guilty, becoming the youngest convicted murderers of the entire 20th century. You have committed a crime of unparalleled evil and barbarity. In my judgment, your conduct was both cunning and very wicked. It is my recommendation that you be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure and kept in custody for very, very many years to come. John Venables' mother Susan actually defended her son and blamed everything on Robert Thompson.
He is easily led. He didn't want to hurt James. He was fearful of the other boy. He was fearful, he was weak, and he was provoked. John was always loving, caring, thoughtful, and considerate. Fun to be with and always had plenty of friends. It's hard to take in, really. We feel so sorry for him because he must be going through so much torment. We just try and help him as best we can to come to terms with things. Our feelings haven't changed towards him. We still think of him the same as we always have. I would say he was provoked. He is one of those children that if you told him to put his hand in the fire, he would. All he said when we've said, why didn't you run away and things like that, is that he was frightened. He said he was frightened of Robert's older brother. Robert said, if you tell anybody, I'll get my big brother to batter you up. My heart really goes out to the Bulgers. I wish we could turn the clocks back. I think about little James and what he must have gone through, how they must feel. I know how I feel as a mother. It's just heartbreaking.
John's father Neil also shared this sentiment, defending John. If you had a league table of children, you would put him at the bottom of the list for anything like this.
I don't think we went wrong at all. He's had the love and attention that any boy would. He has had more love and attention than a lot of children I know. He has been educated. He has never really been a truant. He has had his holidays like everyone else. He has had Christmas presents. He is not a little urchin boy. He's far from it. He has had security with loving parents and a loving brother and sister.
Robert Thompson's solicitor Dominic Lloyd also seemed to share this view. Many years after the trial, a juror said we found them guilty of murder, but we didn't have the option to find them guilty of being 2 very bewildered and frightened little boys who made an awful mistake and need a lot of help.
The main problem that police face is that children are very suggestible. This means that the police must be very careful not to lead them. On the other hand, if they do not lead children in their questioning, the children very often don't give an answer at all. This means that when the case comes to court and the jury see or read what the children have said to the police officers, they very often place no reliance at all upon that evidence because they know how suggestible children actually are.
The judge demanded they be given a minimum sentence of 8 years and have the names of the children released to the public, which some argued against, as they were still just children. The sentence was appealed and instead recommended a minimum sentence of 10 years. The British newspaper The Sun actually received a petition to extend their sentence, which reached nearly 280,000 signatures. After the news broke, James's hero Michael Jackson actually did send a bouquet of flowers and a condolences note to the Bulger family. However, he also showed some empathy for the two killers, actually wanting to visit them in jail, until his wife at the time, Lisa Marie Presley, called him an idiot for wanting to do so, to which he responded, "How dare you say that? I bet if you trace their life you can find they didn't have parents around. They didn't have any love. Nobody there to hold them, look them in their eyes and say I love you. They deserve that. Even though they're going to get life, I just want to say I love you and hold them." Initially, Ralph actually blamed Denise for letting James out of her sight, a thought that he has since regretted and deeply apologised for. "There would be times when I blamed Denise. It was very wrong. It was just part of my raging grief. I wanted to scream, 'Why did you let go of his hand? Why did you let him out of your sight? He would still be here if it wasn't for you.' I am deeply ashamed of blaming Denise. She loved James with her heart and soul, and what happened that day was not her fault."
At what point did you begin to blame her?
It sort of festered on me.
And do you regret, in a way, those feelings of blaming her at the time?
Yeah, I shouldn't have really. She weren't to blame at all.
James helped soothe the pain we had suffered after our first baby Kirsty was stillborn 2 years earlier. From the moment I laid eyes on my son, he stole my heart completely. I started to drink heavily. First it was a bottle of cheap whiskey a day, but that quickly doubled to 2. There is no question that I considered killing myself. The only thing that stopped me was the thought that I would be letting James down once again.
I went to drink a lot.
Just to block out the pain?
Would you say that you became an alcoholic?
Well, that was the dark days, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
How much were you drinking?
Varied. I could drink a bottle of whiskey.
Every day?
Probably 12 cans. More or less stopped eating, kept drinking. In fact, I was just killing myself. But couldn't see it at the time. It's hard waking up every morning knowing you got that much hate in you. And you can't get rid of it. It's like a cancer, gets a grip of you and grows, you know what I mean? It's something you can't stop. I can't stop because it's my son. It's like my son, it's being murdered. I love my son, they ripped everything away from me.
Just 1 month after the two boys were found guilty, Denise and Ralph had another baby boy named Michael. This child gave the couple strength to keep fighting.
Michael pulled me through a dark, dark place. It was that dark, whereas I didn't want to be it anymore. I wanted to be where James was.
However, the marriage would start to crumble, and unfortunately they would split up the following year.
I left Denise for me. What was going on in my head, you know what I mean? It weren't because I had another woman or, you know what I mean? It was something I had to do for myself. Otherwise, I'd probably, I don't know, I probably ended up topping myself, to be honest with you.
I actually think that Ralph and Denise did really well to hold their marriage together for so long after their bereavement. But obviously the pain and the hurting and the grieving was just too much.
By July 1994, the sentence was extended to a minimum of 15 years. They wouldn't be considered for release until February 2008, when they would both be 25. Sadly, in 1997, the decision to extend their sentence was overturned due to the children's age. The next year, Denise went on to marry Stuart Fergus, and they had 2 more sons together, while Ralph remarried and ended up having 3 daughters of his own.
You went on to have 3 sons after James was taken. Yeah. How did you manage to bring up your boys with any sort of balance? How could you let them go off and do anything normal?
No, I wouldn't let them go out. I wouldn't let them play with the friends. It was so hard for me, and I think the lads realise now why I was like that. It's only now that I've got to let them go. I've got to, I've realised I can't keep them under my roof forever.
And you've also got a daughter now, haven't you? Do you worry about your daughter?
Well, worry about all kids where it concerns them.
Yeah.
It's, you just got to be careful, what he's doing.
Robert Thompson and John Venables were both held in separate juvenile detention units apart from one another. Their daily lives were monitored and recorded, and their parents visited every 3 days, though they eventually were forced to move out of the area to avoid the death threats that they had received for their children's actions.
He did like to be liked and loved to have friends, and he's gotten involved with the wrong person. What he's done is wrong, so he needs to be punished. What upsets me is I've no way of bringing him up for the rest of his young years, so he's going to lose all his childhood.
I feel for that family. I feel so sorry for them. I have lost my son as well. We will never be able to do the fun things anymore. Football, snooker, things like that.
I'm effectively in hiding, unable to live anything like a normal life because of the constant and real fear of revenge attacks. Yes, he did tell some lies, but he also told the truth about one thing from beginning to end. He did not kill that baby. I honestly do believe him. They always blame the parents. It's a very difficult situation when you're getting no support as a family. You're alone and you face the world alone, same as I'm doing now.
I've always said, you know, I didn't want them locked up forever. I strongly believe if they'd done a sentence in an adult prison for a good few years, then justice would have been done. But because they never reached the adult prison at all, they only went to young offenders, and they got given the best of everything. They even got to decorate their own bedrooms. That wasn't punishment. That they were rewarded for the crime that they committed. So I don't think that justice was ever done for James, and I don't think, you know, that they should have been released when they were.
They were given the best of everything. I think that's totally wrong. They should have been punished for what they've done in my eyes. They were rewarded. I don't think anyone should be rewarded for a crime like that, no matter how young or old they are.
They took a life. They should pay for it. You know what I mean? They should pay for it. And they haven't. They're being rewarded for it. That's the way I think they have been rewarded for it. They've had the best of everything. Wrong message, the way I see it. That's the wrong message.
They were both taught to keep their identities hidden, and whilst inside, they were still given education, but both reportedly suffered from PTSD. John admitted he was struggling with nightmares and flashbacks to the event, but sadly, justice wouldn't be met. In 1999, some lawyers maintained that the trial was unfair to have put children in an adult's court, but by September, James's parents tried to appeal to keep them both locked up. But they were informed that parents of victims are unable to interfere with a sentencing decision.
I was both shocked and appalled that 10-year-old children were being tried as adults, and especially in England, which the legal community in the U.S. has always regarded as being quite progressive. The most important principles that I think were violated by the Bulger trial in November of '93 are, number one, children as young as 10 and 11 both legally and morally should not be tried as adults. Secondly, children that young are not able to get a fair trial. And they can't get a fair trial because they're too young and immature to instruct counsel.
I've got like a 4-year-old daughter now, and she knows right from wrong. She definitely knew what they were doing. But like, there's no like way or doubt about it that you can say they didn't know, like, yeah, I'll pick this up, I'll smash his skull in with this. Like, I'll do this, I'll take his pants off, we'll drag him onto the track, because he'll be cut in half, know what I mean? Because like, he'll be severed.
Children are not born evil. It's very clear to anyone who is not ignorant that a 10-year-old child has, science has established, only about 40% of the brain development as an adult.
I have difficulty with evil as a concept. It's just applied to behaviour we don't understand. And that word can't apply to children as young as 10. I just don't see a child of 10 being beyond help. Someone we should wash our hands of, who can't be saved, can't be improved. That kind of callousness to a child of 10 is not an attitude that really helps us as people. Unless we believe our children can be something better than we are, then what are we doing here? For a child of 10 to behave in that way, there must be evidence of something seriously wrong with their upbringing. Something dangerously and fundamentally flawed. It's not just about having had it tough. Both boys gained A levels whilst inside, and though some considered Robert Thompson a psychopath who lacked any remorse, others felt that Venables did actually have some sympathy and regret for what he did. Neither boy showed any violent or aggressive behaviour inside, serving their time quietly and without any further incident. In 2000, John Venables, who was now 17 years old, was considered unlikely to reoffend, and they claimed his chances of rehabilitation were very high. Despite this, it was alleged that during his time inside, he actually had sex with a staff worker at the unit. This wasn't discovered until 10 years later, and the woman was suspended for sexual misconduct, but she never returned. It was believed by some that the unit covered this up to protect themselves, which they denied. John Venables' lawyer Tom Laughlin was not only outraged by the fact that children were put through an adult court, but he actually rallied to get them released. He formed a close relationship with John Venables and claimed that he witnessed him blossom, mature and develop over the years, even sending him Christmas cards.
Both of these boys, at almost the youngest age imaginable, 10, were incarcerated for over 8 years in maximum security confinement. Now, in addition to the onerous incarceration which they suffered, they lost all the rest of their childhood and every bit of their adolescence. Indeed, they're totally different people now than they were when they were 10. And indeed, I would ask each adult out there that's listening to me, are you the same as you were at 10? There has been a lot of work done in the case of Robert Thompson and John Venables by their caretakers that seems to have gone wonderfully well. And all of that would be wasted if that they were not in a legal position now to realize their full human potential. John Venables, he's blossomed tremendously. He made this for me. As you can see from that, is a very talented and creative person. He actually won a national award with making a ceramic peacock.
I just love Laughlin to be in my shoes for just one day, thinking about me and James for just one day. Sit down, just think like what he's done, the consequences that it's had on us. You know what I mean? And instead of thinking about it, then just think just one day. That's all I'd ask. Think one day and think what you've done.
A society can and should be judged by the way it treats its children, and it's got to treat children like Robert and John humanely, even if it means pain for parents who have lost children. But unfortunately, a lot of times to accomplish the greater good in life, we have to go through some pain.
John has a lot of creative, artistic talent. He is a lot of fun to be with. Each time I visited him, I could see he had made progress. These boys have clearly been reformed and rehabilitated. They should now be allowed to make something of their lives. If they are allowed by society to make something of their lives, they will give back to society immeasurably.
There may be millions of people who disagree with me or even hate me for doing that, but I say to them, every child is worth trying to save, and that includes these two little boys.
I know from first hand, I've had my heart ripped out. I've tried to fight the state, I've tried to work with the state. Where's it got me? It's got me nowhere.
In June 2001, it was concluded that neither boy, now 18 years old, was a threat to public safety, and they were both released after just 8 years.
The law has taken its course, the politicians have been unable to interfere with it, and the result, John Venables and Robert Thompson are free on licence for the rest of their lives.
They were both given brand new identities, moved to secret locations and given new passports, new national insurance, new qualification certificates and brand new medical records. They weren't allowed to contact one another or any of James Bulger's family, and they weren't allowed to visit the Mersey region again where the murder took place. They had to report to their probation officers, and they may also possibly be given a curfew, or they would return to prison.
And do you ever hear from the probation service? Because of course they are both banned from the county of Merseyside, but do you ever have any reassuring calls from them to tell you that, you know, the probation is, that the parole is continuing properly?
No, not at all. They don't tell me nothing at all. And even if they are banned from Merseyside, who's to say that they're not still entering, because it's been proven that Venables was still entering Merseyside on this ban. He was going to Everton games, he was drinking in Liverpool. I've got a lot of family that live in Liverpool who also drink in town, so why do I not know a member of my family was not speaking to him?
Their anonymity was actually legally binding. The media was warned to not publish any of their details for the boys' own safety, as they knew the public would then hunt them down. However, Manchester Evening News didn't listen and published details of where the two boys stayed, causing them to be fined £30,000 and ended up having to pay an extra £120,000.
At the end of the day, it was a victory for murderers. How was that possible? For me, it was like a knife in the back. I thought that the state would have been there for us. You know what I mean? And really, like, at the end of the day, like, all I've seen from it is, like, Thompson and Venables, like, get the best of everything. Get, like, put in a secure unit. Like, nothing's happened to them. Like, never went to a proper prison. So, like, what are they talking? Yeah, it's alright, Walt, murder a child.
They probably would have had their humanity destroyed by being sent to an adult prison and punished far into adulthood for something they did at the tender age of 10.
Look at what they done, you know what I mean? Look exactly what they done. Like, you weren't just, like, pleased with killing them, fucking beating them to death. You had to fucking put him on a track to, like, sever his body in half. This is my son.
John Venables and Robert Thompson held up a very disturbing mirror to society. And when society saw what was in that mirror, it recoiled, but rather than say, well, wait a minute, we've got to do better, it became, I guess it's human nature. It is, kill the messenger rather than look at the message. And so these boys became very demonized and very hated by a large segment of society.
Do you think that people who've committed serious crimes should not automatically be released after they're, halfway through their sentences?
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I think everyone will agree with me on this one. If you commit a serious crime, be prepared to do the time.
I was always let down. Everything that I tried to do, I just felt like I wasn't listened to, wasn't heard. They didn't want to know. The police did come round and they said they're going to get released. And I just sat there and I thought, well, where do I go from here? They're going to get properly protected. They're going to get looked after.
Change of identity and everything.
Yeah, everything. How do I not know they're not going to go back to James's grave? And I did say, they will re-offend. I said, and when they do, it's blood on your hands.
In March 2002, John Venables lived hidden from the public and allegedly began a relationship with a woman who had a 5-year-old child, though he denied having ever actually met them. By 2004, Denise was given an anonymous tip of Robert Thompson's location, and while she did go to that location and spotted him, she admitted that she was so paralysed with anger and hatred that she refused to confront him. In 2005, John was now 23 when his probation officer met another girlfriend of his who was only 17. He allegedly had many young girlfriends, and it was believed that this was due to him having delayed adolescence. However, he supposedly also began excessively drinking, taking drugs, visiting the Merseyside area anyway, as well as downloading child abuse images. In 2006, though unconfirmed, stories circulated that Robert Thompson had now come out as gay, and at age 23 was in a happy and stable relationship with a partner who most likely knows his true identity. Years later, during the production of a documentary, Channel 5 did actually manage to get a statement from Robert Thompson, who claimed that his personal life at the time was so miserable he actually had a better life being locked up. He stated that he became a much better person behind bars, and he said that he was desperately sorry for what he had done. By 2008, Venables' probation officer claimed that now 26-year-old John spent most of his free time playing video games and being on the internet. On March 14th that year, Denise opened up the Red Balloon Learner Centre in Merseyside in memory of her son James.
We give free holidays to deserving kids who are going through severe bullying, kids who are doing well in societies, doing well in school. We're just open to a wide range really, kids who have to care for parents or siblings. No, it's just a number of things that we give free holidays to, and it's a lovely place and a lovely area for the kids to be in. I'd love people to get involved with the charity. Running a charity is such hard work these days, and it's really hard to get funds, and that's what our charity runs on. It's, you know, people's donations. That's what we have to rely on. We don't get funded by anyone at all, so every penny that we earn, you know, we've got to go out and do it ourselves. But without the donations, then this charity wouldn't be happening and we wouldn't be able to keep it going. So we urge people to help us, even if it is through just a donation.
But by September that year, John Venables was arrested again on suspicion of fighting outside of a nightclub, though he claimed it was in self-defense. All charges were dropped as he agreed to go on an alcohol awareness course. By December, he was found with cocaine and given a curfew. It was also discovered that he had revealed his true identity to at least 2 friends during this time.
What are your fears, should we say, for what might happen now? Because they're in society under assumed names. Do you think that's right, that people who meet them have no way of knowing who they are, both Thompson and Venables?
Well, definitely not, no, because I still feel that they are a danger, especially more so Venables. Now he's proven that he is still a danger. No one knows who they're talking to these days. I mean, he could be getting on with someone, you know, who's got children, and, you know, she could be trusting him and leaving him alone with that child, and the child is too young to speak. God knows what's going on behind closed doors with him.
By February 2010, John was now 28 when he contacted his probation officer, concerned that his identity was being discovered by his colleagues. When the officer arrived at his flat, he caught John trying desperately to remove or destroy his computer's hard drive with a knife and a tin opener. The machine was quickly taken away for examination, where they found child sexual abuse material, including videos involving children as young as 2 being raped by grown adults. On March the 2nd, he was returned to prison for violating the terms of his release, and 5 days later he was also accused of possessing child pornography, but still managed to maintain his hidden identity.
This has been half of your life fighting for James, and this is continuing. You do not want to see him out.
I don't trust him. You know, if he gets out, I know for a fact we're going to end up with another case like James's, because he's so used to being locked up now in prison. He's not looking over his shoulders anymore. He's got people protecting him. You know, he's getting the best attention he can possibly get. If he gets released, he's going to be looking over his shoulder. Through his own stupidity, he released a photo of himself through social media. So he's just going to be fearing his life. So I think, what is he going to do again to get back into that prison where he feels safe again?
What do you fear might happen if the anonymity isn't removed? What are your fears? Because you've mentioned you're worried for all parents out there. What are your fears?
Well, you wouldn't want this person living next door to you, would you? And you'd want to know who he is, so your kids aren't at risk. You know what I mean? But if they're taking that away from you, you haven't got to say, have you? The laws have got to change, haven't they? Like the laws are behind the times now, and they need to be looked at, seriously looked at. Whatever we can do now, it's mainly for the public, for their kids.
The crucial thing that you would like is for his anonymity to be removed. Is that the key for you?
Well, I think that's got to be removed.
What do you say to the people that if you did that, somebody would take the law into their own hands?
Well,
maybe.
You shouldn't really do it, but the murder they done is
it's premeditated,
as it was, and it's in them.
That same month, England's Children Commissioner Maggie Atkinson actually raised the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 12, claiming that children should be given programs to turn their lives around, rather than being prosecuted. But this was actually denied by the Ministry of Justice, claiming that kids at the age of 10 definitely know the difference between right and wrong.
The case raised far-reaching questions about the age of criminal responsibility and exactly what kind of society we had become.
However, Denise was outraged that she wasn't even informed that John Venables was back in prison. She demanded that his anonymity be completely removed. There were reports that a man in Fleetwood, Lancashire was John Venables. This had been spread a few times, and the innocent man was bombarded with harassment and had to leave the area. In April 2010, a 19-year-old male from the Isle of Man posted on Facebook and claimed that his colleague was Robert Thompson. This turned out to be false, but he was given a 3-month suspended prison sentence for putting the innocent man in unnecessary harm. On June the 21st, John was finally charged with the possession and distribution of indecent images of children. He had downloaded 57 indecent images and shared them with others. He pleaded guilty and was charged with 2 years. It turns out he had also posed as a 35-year-old married woman from Liverpool named Dawn Smith, bragging about abusing her 8-year-old daughter. This was a ploy in order to receive more child abuse material.
And if you were punching the bag now, what would you be saying?
I'd be saying nothing, I'd just be hitting it. We'd be thinking about it, like Thompson and Venables, wouldn't it?
What would life be like for you if you let it go? If it went away?
On May 2nd, 2011, it was determined that Venables would have to be given a whole new identity yet again, and on June the 27th, he was denied parole for another year. In November, it was concluded that he would have to stay in prison for the foreseeable future, as they were convinced otherwise he would reveal his true identity if released. In March 2012, a 26-year-old from Chorley set up a Facebook group called What Happened to James Bulger Was Fucking Hilarious. He was promptly arrested and his computer was seized for further investigation, though nothing more was found. On August the 10th, 2012, 36-year-old father Scott Bradley was accused of being Robert Thompson, which led to a barrage of verbal abuse and a hate mob forming in his village of Garlioston in Scotland, where he had moved to 7 years earlier. Sadly, he ended up taking his own life, leaving behind a note that read, "They called me all sorts, a paedophile, a follower of young girls, walking around bullying old people, the list is endless, and I'm supposed to be a child killer." His body was discovered by his mother, Sue.
My son was tormented by the allegations. He had a good heart and didn't deserve this. It's been heartbreaking. He kept saying, "I've had enough. I'm going to kill myself." But I didn't believe him.
Denise was deeply saddened to hear of this death, but maintained that the man would have still been alive if the two killers' identities were in fact revealed to the public.
What happened to Scott makes my blood run cold. I'm shocked and upset that he's apparently taken his own life. Whatever the rights and wrongs of this case, this is one that shows how dangerous it is to spread false rumours and gossip about something as serious as the identity of child killers. Sadly, Scott's death goes to show that it is other people who are left to suffer as a result of the official conspiracy, lies, and deceit that the authorities have used in this case.
It's believed that these stories began when a local playwright actually wrote a fictional story about Robert Thompson moving to a remote coastal village in that area. It was to the point that the playwright was actually questioned by police. In 2013, many people had been charged for posting photos online, claiming them to be the boys now as adults, possibly putting innocent people in danger. On April the 26th, 2 men did this, posting on Facebook, which was seen by 24,000 people, and they were arrested for it. On July the 4th, John Venables was now 30 years old when his release was approved, and by September the 3rd, it was confirmed that he was now back out in the public.
I've just got no faith in them whatsoever. have no faith in the system whatsoever. I wouldn't trust what they say or what they do.
I'd like to be a person like I used to be, really. You know what I mean? But, like I say, when they killed James, I think they killed that person. Venables and like Thompson, what they've done, they've made me the way I am now, the person that I am now. I don't like the person I am now, but I've got to live with it.
On November the 27th that year, a man from Liverpool posted images of someone who he claimed was John Venables. He received a 14-month suspended prison sentence. On July the 14th, 2016, a woman from Margate actually sent Denise some messages on Twitter, pretending to be one of the killers and even posing as James's ghost. She was given 3 years in prison, which would later be reduced to 2.5. On October the 25th, 2016, a man was caught stalking Denise, which he had already done 8 years prior and was given a warning for, but was now sentenced to 26 weeks in prison for harassment. By November the 23rd, 2017, John Venables was now 34 years old when he was arrested yet again for possessing child sexual abuse images. On January the 5th the following year, he was officially charged with unspecified offences regarding the indecent images of children. This is my own fault. I have let people down again. I have had urges, inquisitive. It won't be a slap on the wrist for me.
But the justice system has to take that emotion out, doesn't it? And has to give people a chance to rehabilitate, and they were very young, they were
But that's
just
the
10.
point, he's still doing it.
So, but, you know,
He's done it twice, again.
So has the rehabilitation worked for the people who will say he had a traumatic childhood, there were reasons maybe for his behaviour, but having done all of that,
there's loads of kids have traumatic childhoods,
I know.
and they don't do what they've done.
I'm hoping that Venables never is released. He thinks he's untouchable. That's what he thinks. And he probably thinks in the next few months he'll probably be walking a free man again. And I'm fighting so hard that that doesn't happen.
I always feel it's right that a young child who commits a crime should be given rehabilitation and the chance to make something of their lives. And Robert Thompson, the other boy, seems to have done that. He's stayed out of trouble, he's got a family of his own. He's the classic case of tick, well done. Yeah. John Venables, now these orders, these anonymity orders are very rare. But John Venables, how many times does somebody have to keep committing a crime? Because what's happening is that his anonymity is protecting him from the crimes that so every time he does a crime, we don't know who he is, and then he comes back into society. Yeah. Does he meet people who don't know what his background is? You know, and I think he's now committing these crimes as an adult. He's making his choice to commit these crimes as an adult, therefore he has no further right to anonymity.
Robert Thompson hasn't reoffended, he's carried on with his.
As far as we are aware.
As far as Venables is concerned, do you believe that there is a chance of any sort of rehabilitation?
No. He was given that chance twice since James was taken from me, and you know he blew them chances. I think now he should remain in prison. In the beginning, I did say, you know, if he's on an adult prison sentence, then you know I wouldn't have took it as far as I have done. I would have been living a normal life now. But because they weren't properly punished, I did say one of them or both of them are going to go onto the offence. That's exactly what he's done.
On February the 7th, he pleaded guilty once again and even confessed to having a paedophile manual, giving advice for child molesters and how to groom children and avoid detection. He was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison.
Sitting through this hearing today has been a new and horrendous experience for Denise, listening to the vile and horrendous behaviour that Venables has engaged in yet again. The length of the sentence is too short. 3 years is really a farce because this is reoffending and there is a pattern to this behaviour. To hear his counsel say in one breath that Venables was only 10 when he carried out the horrendous murder of James, and then to go on to apologise or to offer some kind of apology about the harm and hurt that his reoffending has caused is simply rubbing salt in the wound, and it's an apology that Denise rejects.
It just makes you cringe, you know, listen to this stuff in the courts and look exactly what they're about to say. All this paedophile stuff with him and this manual he had, it's just sickening. I'd like to see him kept away from the public, so he can't do nothing to another child or
behind bars for life.
Well, possibly, or monitored 24/7, where he can't do nothing. You've got to keep on top of this person, because he's just waiting to do something. In my eyes, with this manual,
I suppose
he's had it for a reason.
That same year, controversially, a short film based on the real-life events was released. The Bolger family weren't even informed beforehand.
As we went straight into the new year, we were with this. It's now shortlisted for an Oscar, and that's when, you know, reality hit. And I thought, why is it getting an Oscar? We don't know anything about this film. We weren't even contacted. No one in James's family, none of us were contacted over this. I just don't understand why it's done in the first place, and I think the outcry is because, as James's family, we weren't contacted, we weren't told about this film, we weren't warned about it, we would just sit with it. And going back to the two lads who've played the role, they've probably gone to school, they've been told everything that them two done to James, so they've had to play their part. So they've gone to school, they've spoke to their friends, so what's going through their minds now as well?
We contacted Vincent Lamb, the director of Detainment. He said the film was never intended to bring any further anguish to the family of James Bulger, and we never intended any disrespect by not consulting them. While it is painfully a difficult case to understand, I believe we have a responsibility to try and make sense of what happened. Critics have specifically commended the film for being responsible and respectful to the victim. If he had contacted you, what would you have said?
I'd have asked him to let me see what the film was going to be about first, how it was going to, not be about, but how he was going to plan it out. No, I wouldn't have agreed with the way he's done it. You know, something like this you can't stop. But, you know, for the pain that he's put us through again, to relive this nightmare that I've been living all these years anyway, you know, I don't want anyone, any other family, any victim's family to go through what we're living through. I mean, if he gets away with this, if he gets this Oscar, then it's going to give anyone the right to go and pick on a family who's been through something like this and do whatever they want with it.
They demanded the director withdraw the movie from the Oscars, but he refused to do so, claiming that it would make creating the movie entirely pointless. On January the 31st, 2019, a man and woman pleaded guilty after they posted photos online of someone they claimed to have been John Venables, and both received a suspended prison sentence. On March the 4th, James's father Ralph finally lost a long legal battle to try to lift John's anonymity. This was denied for the sake of Venables' safety, a decision often criticised by the public. On March the 13th, just a week later, actress Tina Malone posted Venables' supposed identity on Facebook and received an 8-month suspended prison sentence.
I only went on Facebook a couple of years ago because I'm not really good with social media. When I do go on it, go like. I've actually had friends message me going, Tina, don't like your own stuff. You know, so I'm not great with it. And it was just one of those nights it came up. And I just happened to believe that anything that's on the internet, you know, whether it's girls beating someone up or, you know, terrorist stuff or whatever, that it's legal. I just thought that if something was out there because of the current situation of the person involved, I just didn't realise what I was doing was illegal. I didn't mean to incite or provoke any violence or anything, and it was over a year ago, and so the repercussions have been horrendous on my life. I just saw it and just shared it. I didn't post it. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, I didn't facilitate it. When a journalist rang me and then it went in the papers, and then my mum and my brother and different people went, can you believe what you've done? And my husband went, what are you? And I truly didn't. know what I was doing. Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh, I'm really sorry. I said I was going to do this, and then I've just got a £10,000 fine.
Yeah.
I just feel I've let me mum down and me husband. Watch what you do on social media. We're not just talking sending an ex a text when you're drunk at 2 in the morning or a message or... You know, I would never, I'm a devout Catholic, I would never incite or in any way provoke violence.
By June, the authorities actually considered moving John to another country, possibly Canada, Australia or New Zealand, to maintain his anonymity, considering they had now spent £65,000 to keep his identity hidden. However, due to his past, he would need an exemption under the New Zealand Immigration Act, and the country's government even told them to not even bother applying. In January 2020, a 53-year-old woman from South Wales posted an alleged photo of John Venables on Facebook, asking everyone to share it as much as possible. She was given an 8-month sentence, suspended for 15 months, though she often showed remorse for her actions, so her sentence was reduced. By September, John was once again denied parole, and in October 2022, when John was 39, there was another parole hearing due to take place, but this was postponed, and he currently remains in prison today, though for a while it was believed that he would be released yet again. The Bolger family's solicitor, Robin Macon, representing Ralph and James's brother Jimmy, continues to fight to keep John locked up permanently. We are really concerned. As far as Ralph and Jimmy are concerned, he is a real danger. Ralph has been completely let down by the Ministry of Justice. 30 years does seem like yesterday. The wounds don't ever heal when you have buried a child, but they certainly can never do so when one of the murderers responsible persists in re-offending and then continues to bid for freedom.
This is my biggest step forward in 29 years in justice for James. We need the Prime Minister or her new Justice Secretary to step in immediately and make sure my son's killer stays firmly behind bars where he belongs. We are calling on them to please intervene now.
They had like rights all the way through. Where was James's rights? You know what I mean? They had rights all the way through. What was James's only right? The right to die, the right to be murdered.
I know a lot of people say forgiving is a healer, but I don't think it is. I'll never forgive them.
Never forgive. To be honest with you, I'd never forgive. Because of what they done.
So in a way, it actually is easier to hate than to forgive.
Couldn't forgive that. That's not in me to forgive them for what they've done.
Hatred against the two boys?
Yeah. And the system.
And the system again.
He was sadly taken, and I guess the anger that you feel, the hatred that you feel, quite understandably, is still there.
Well, hate's a big word, and
I'm just talking as a father.
Hasn't got any easier through the years, you know what I mean? Everyone says like, oh, you'll get like easier with time. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Time doesn't cure it.
Not only has the anonymity been criticised, but Venables was even allowed to leave the country for a holiday in Norway, but it's unclear if the Norwegian government were informed who he really was.
Do the probation service keep you informed? Are you aware of any changes that were made to Venables' parole?
No.
I mean, he was allowed out of the country to go on holiday to Scandinavia. Would you have been expected to be told when that happened?
Well, I was told if they were to leave the secure homes, I would be informed, but that was never the case. I was never told if they were leaving or if they were having days out or anything like that, so no.
After 30 years of grief, Denise finally found the closest thing that could possibly be considered relief. For decades, people believed that James had also been sexually assaulted by the two boys and that it was a rape and murder. But Professor Paul Britton, a forensic psychologist on the case, didn't believe in such a theory. The two boys were plain and simply murderers. Venables and Thompson had no proper sexual involvement with James. Bolger was injured in all sorts of different ways, and whilst he may have been injured in a way that would have included, if you like, all of his body, there wasn't what you would call an adult sexual attack on him.
I was probably thinking the worst case scenario. I know it was bad, the outcome was really bad anyway, but I had images of when James was still here, you know, what they done while he was still, you know, alive.
I think we have to make it clear here, and it's awful to say, but your greatest concern was that they had sexually abused him.
Yeah, yeah. But with the phone call, he assured me that James wasn't. Yeah. So that made me feel a lot better than I've felt over near enough 30 years, because I was strongly led to believe that James was sexually assaulted by them.
For 30 years, there were lots of details about James's death that I would have wanted to avoid, but I finally felt strong enough to hear it. And whilst others were blindsided and distracted by the fact that they were such physically small children, which some thought meant that it was impossible that they could have committed such a crime, his brain quickly defined them as murderers. But upon hearing that my son's death had not been sexually motivated, I feel that something's fundamentally shifted in me. That has been such a block over the years. The excuse that they were only children themselves who didn't deserve the adult labels of murderers has always been hard for me to hear. I've no doubt that Venables is now a sexual deviant and a massive danger to society, but it is with great peace of mind to know that James's murder was not sexually driven. What we have been promised has made the last 30 years pushing for James worth it. Under Raab's new law, Venables would never see the light of day.
Justice Secretary Dominic Raab did claim that he has implemented a new reform bill, a 2 strikes and you stay in policy. And considering John has now reoffended twice, if this gets passed, he will remain in jail for the rest of his life. If Venables is walking around as a free man as we mark 30 years of losing our beautiful boy, it would be the ultimate betrayal. Mr. Raab has pledged to crack down on the most dangerous criminals in this country. Venables should be top of that list and never see daylight again. We know that he will never be rehabilitated. He is very sick and dangerous. This is a fully grown killer paedophile the authorities want to release back into the community without anyone knowing who he is. I'm bracing for the worst news because I've no trust left in the warped system of this country. But Dominic Raab can change that. We've got to watch this sexual deviant. We know what he's capable of. He's just waiting for another victim. Let's make sure there are no more victims.
I strongly believe that I am in touching distance now of getting justice for one of my son's killers. I don't ever want him to see the light of day again. I don't think he deserves to see the light of day again. I think he's going to bring in new laws, and I'm hoping he does. I'm hoping, you know, what was said to us in that room, I'm sure he will carry it through, because I absolutely trust him.
Unfortunately, life still goes on. You've got to function.
Is it difficult sometimes?
Well, it's difficult all the time, but you just got to carry on.
My brother's killers will never be forgiven. They took away my older brother who I never got to meet. I would have loved to have looked up to him, asked him questions, talked to him about exams, cars, going to bars, normal stuff. But because of those two, I never got the chance. They robbed me of my childhood in a nutshell. Justice for James would mean keeping Venables behind bars to provide peace of mind to our family, particularly my mother.
I feel hopeful for the first time in 30 years, and this legislation could bring justice for James and for future potential victims.
Sometimes you feel like you're having a heart attack. It's just a big knot in your chest, and that's been there since day one.
All these years later, it still takes me by surprise that James is in the ground and that my baby has gone. A new gravestone is not exactly the gift you'd imagine giving your child on such a special birthday.
I don't want any other family to go through what I've had to go through.
I wouldn't want no one to know what it's like, to be honest with you. I wouldn't want them to know and you know how it feels to be the way I'm feeling, the way I think. You know what I mean? I'm a totally different person. And I'll never be the person like I was.
In my judgment, the home background, upbringing, family circumstances, parental behaviour and relationships were needed in the public domain, so that informed and worthwhile debate can take place for the public good in the case of grave crimes by young children.
We speak about James like he's still here. That's the way I want it to be, and that's the way it'll always be. It makes me feel good as well, because I am doing something around his birthday. He's not forgotten, and I hope James knows that I'll never forget. That's why we are holding the black tie around his birthday. But I class it from the 12th across to the 14th, because he obviously went missing on the 12th and he was found on the 14th. So what we do them 3 days is spend it as a family. We go to the cemetery, lay flowers for James. And as I say, it's not just days where we just speak about, because we speak about him constantly anyway. Just to put flowers, we spend a bit of time at the cemetery, but we also spend a lot of time together as a family. And obviously he was found on the 14th, which is Valentine's Day. Everyone's out, all loved up and everything, whereas we can't do that. We choose just to spend the day, well, the whole 3 days really as a family. You know, I just don't think it's right that means she would go for meals on that day. It doesn't feel right at all, and I always say to Stuart, as much as he loves doing it, don't buy me flowers. You know, if you're going to buy flowers, let's just take them to his grave and put them down for him.
I find it like hard to like laugh and joke and like have fun with people. You know, like you always put like a little front on, like put a false smile.
Cleaning up as I normally did. Michael was busy playing around, but he was downstairs with a member of family. I was bleaching around the sink in the bathroom when I felt a tugging at them days. I wore night dresses and I felt a tugging at the back of my night dress. I thought someone, the person that was with Michael, had brought him up in a turn around. There was no one there. So when I shouted for Michael, he replied, but he was downstairs. There's no way he could have got downstairs that quick.
So you think that might just have been James reaching out?
It was definitely a tugging at the back, and there was no one else in the house apart from, as I say, me, a member of my family, and Michael, and they were downstairs. So it was definitely someone there, yeah.
Despite documentaries seemingly defending their young boys' actions, dismissing them as merely children who made a mistake,
Venables was depicted very much as sort of the shy, timid of
Emotional
the two,
one, yeah.
emotional one, and we know historically where that led, and there's sort of no mention of what happened to these boys afterwards, and you feel that it's kind of an untrue, not very realistic interpretation of the truth.
For the part of the film that he's chosen from the interview tapes of Thompson and Venables, he's done it where there's an actor, obviously, who's portraying Venables, who's emotional at the time. Venables went on to re-offend twice now. He's in prison for child pornography. The child that played Thompson comes across very bullish, very angry, aggressive to the police officers. So he's trying to like humanise and feel sorry for Venables, which I just think's totally wrong about it.
the public have lambasted this thought process. Neighbours of the children had claimed they witnessed them often shooting pigeons' heads off with air guns. They often stole charity collection boxes or tying rabbits to railway lines.
To this day, I've still got James's jumper folded to the bottom of a drawer. I've kept everything. I've had all his toys. I've kept all his clothes. It's just something that I can't part with. James will always be a part of my life. I don't keep looking at them or anything like that. I just know that they're there. But this certain jumper that I have got, I can still kind of smell James on it. I mean, the amount of people that, you know, stop me in shopping centres and stuff and say, I've read your book, and it feels to me like you brought your little boy alive again.
Yeah.
But that was the intentions with writing the book, because everybody's seeing James just as a picture. Whereas I wanted to make James's memory alive again and let people know exactly what James was like and the short life that he lives. James was always getting classed as the murdered 2-year-old, and I didn't want him to remain like that. I wanted something good to come out of what happened to him. And the only way I could think about doing something in his memory is to set up the charity in his name and just to help as many kids as I possibly could in his name.
What's happened to me? Tripped my soul out. When they killed him, they killed a piece of me. To get a taste of life, man, he's like, had it ripped away from him.
You have a couple who've lost their most precious child, and they're just in bits. There's support coming from family, great support from family and from general public. The cards and the messages of sympathy was just super and kept them going. But bottom line, you've got two people who are hurting extremely, hurting very much. And they're tearing themselves apart inside.
But the motive behind this vicious attack, whether or not their lifelong anonymity should be lifted, and who was truly responsible out of the two boys, these are questions we can simply ponder. And while we all continue to honour the short life of James Bulger, we can do nothing more than look at this case and continue seeking answers. Hello guys, this is Rob from Seeking Answers. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you do want to see more, please consider donating to Patreon or clicking that join button below to become a channel member. Unfortunately, YouTube's monetization doesn't really cater to the content that we make, so we do need all the help that we can get. I also realised that not everyone is able to give a monthly payment, so there is now a PayPal link in the description if anyone does want to donate a one-off payment. Doesn't matter the amount, any amount is appreciated. And if you do a one-off payment, you'll be able to request a case for us to cover, and it will really go towards helping the channel out and continuing to grow the community. Any amount is appreciated and it will go towards keeping this channel alive and making more content, going on location more. You will get perks in exchange and you will help really give this channel the boost it needs. Thank you for all of your support and tune in next week for another video.